Joining us now is Mel Sanders from the South East Rivers Trust.
Hi everyone, thanks Jan and Carl for organising everyone else involved. I'm Mel and I did the Aquatic Science course in 2018. But before that I was always quite interested in the watery environment. I grew up near the upper reaches of the River Thames and spent a lot of time playing in chalk streams and watercress beds. It's very idyllic. Now I know what most rivers look like. But yeah, I was always really interested poking around, and that really kind of sparked my interest in the natural environment. So I went off to Aberystwyth University to do a degree in physical geography, and there again I was quite biased towards rivers, and did all the modules that had water in them, and then did my dissertation on a river restoration project in the Eden Valley in Cumbria, which is at those pictures there. So it was really interesting. I was using GIS map paleo channels to inform a river restoration project. So that was really my first kind of foray into conservation delivery scene. And yeah, it's very inspiring. I met some interesting people. And then I went off to work in consultancy for a bit, and then I decided that I wanted to learn more about our freshwater habitats. So did a quick Google and found the Aquatic Science course. I thought it looked great. So yeah, I packed in my work and came to London and just had an absolute blast really, I think, like most of us who did the course. Saw some great critters and went on some great field trips and was just really inspired by everybody I met and the work that we did. So I think the biggest lesson I learned really from the course was just how much was going on around us. It really opened my eyes to all these different ecosystems and just what was going on and how everything was so linked. So I think the key message I learned from the course was connectivity and the importance of all these systems being connected. And that sparked my survey for my dissertation there, which was doing research into beavers in Scotland on the Tay system and how they affect aquatic terrestrial links. So I was up there catching emergent insects, pickling them, which I felt really bad about, and then just working out the difference between streams with beavers on and streams without beavers on, and obviously there were more insects where there were beavers, and then I looked at the birds as well. Yeah, so I just got to spend a few weeks in beaver land, which was really lovely. So after that I was definitely sold in a career in freshwater conservation. So I went to work for Staffordshire Wildlife Trust. I was very lucky when I started there. I picked up various projects, but one that was almost ready for delivery, which was this big river restoration project on the River Trent. So there I just got to kind of watch the diggers come in, point to various trees that should be chucked in, and I oversaw this really cool restoration project. So we were restoring this paleo channel, which is where the river used to run. It's reinstating this river island. So when we dug down, we found all the natural river gravels, which is amazing really. And because we were kind of re-digging this channel, we were able to put in lots of natural features. So lots of trees, lots of cobbles to make riffles, and lots of pools. So we made quite a nice habitat. And it was really cool to walk through the channel before the Trent had been unplugged. You can see, oh look, like there's a pool, but yeah, there was no water in it. So it was very interesting. And I was really lucky really to join at a time where I got to work on such big projects. I don't think I realised at the time how long it takes to get to delivery stage. And then from Staffordshire I moved down south. I now work with the South East Rivers Trust. So I work, it's a huge catchment, it's literally the South East, but I just work with mould mainly and the Catchment, which is really nice because they're very different catchments. And I have quite a varied role really, similar to Ben was saying earlier. I'm quite lucky, I get to do lots of different things. So one of the main things I do is work with stakeholders, and that's through catchment partnerships in the Mole and the Picnic. I work very closely with the Surrey Wildlife Trust, and they're just kind of a way to bring people together who have an interest in rivers and their catchments. We think about opportunities and issues and potential projects in our catchments, and kind of come up with ways to go around things, or just degree, but either way, we get to talk about it. I do quite a lot of community engagement as well, so guided walks and guided talks, and I do a fair bit of data analysis as well with our GIS team. So things like using natural capital to look for opportunities within catchments, and also looking at where there are gaps in data as well that we might be able to fill with our projects, because all of our projects are data and science led. The kinds of projects that I work on now are to do with things like fish passage, so weirs, removing them or making them passable, habitat creation, anything to do with habitat really. Again, bringing in connectivity and trying to link habitats up. Increasingly working with landowners on land management techniques, so things like improving soil structure, reducing runoff, and different ways of farming, regenerative farming. And unfortunately, this involves a lot of walkovers, so you get to be outside quite a lot as well, which is nice. One of my favourite projects I worked on was to do with eels. So I think my first essay on organic science was about eels, and I just couldn't believe what they get up to. So when I was asked to work on this project, I was delighted. So it was a partnership project with different British trusts and ZSL in the Thames Catchment. And it was basically raising awareness of the European eel to schools and to communities. So I got to do community talks and walks about eels, lecture people about eels, which was great. And we also did some elder migration monitoring as well. So we had an eel trap on the mole where we had volunteers out counting and measuring how many elders were working their way to the catchment. And some days were over 100, so we had to fish out each individual one, put it in a bag and measure it. So they were there for hours. I don't think they realised what they signed up to on some days. And then lastly, we had a new citizen science scheme called Obstacle Eels, which is basically where volunteers went out and walked stretches of, well, in my catchment is a mole, but other catchments in the Thames, and noted down where barriers were. As I mentioned earlier, we looked at data sets where there are gaps in the data, and the data set that we had of the barriers last year, we had about 55 on the mole, and when our volunteers finished their surveys, they found 66 more barriers, so more than double what we had before. So this is really good data to have. It will help us prioritise projects in the future and barriers that we can make passable and try and connect the catchment up a little bit more. So I think from my career and my studies, I've learned quite a few lessons. But the biggest one I think is the collaborative working. I can't remember who it was earlier said that they heard the word stakeholder, but they didn't really know what it meant until they started working. Bringing people together and working on projects together, I think is a lot more successful than trying to go do things alone. I've had great successes in all the kind of partnership projects that we've worked on, and it's been really valuable. So I think that links in quite closely with knowledge sharing. The Thames Eels project is a really good example of this. We all worked in different catchments, but doing similar things. We had lots of lessons that we learned, and lots of data and information to share. And there's a lot of people in this sector. We've got a lot of expertise and different backgrounds, so it's really nice to be able to share our knowledge at things like this event. Education has been mentioned a few times, but it's at the heart of many of our projects at the South East Rivers Trust. There's not much point in doing work without people sort of understanding it, and obviously we want to carry on doing it in the future. So that's a key lesson, and I think it's also really important to monitor our successes. It's not always possible to do monitoring, but I think so much of our work and projects come about from things like degradation of habitats or declines in species, and it's a bit depressing. So I think it's really important that we look at the success and the positives that we've made, and also that can help us to learn as well as we move on. And then lastly, I like to be patient, because realise quite quickly that it can take quite a long time for projects to come to fruition, and sometimes it takes a long time for changes to be seen as well, especially when you're not actively working on something. If you're just leaving a habitat to restore itself, you're not going to see changes overnight. So yeah, in the future, I'd like to see more funding. I know that's an obvious one, but it's important, and not just for direct project delivery. Things like Catchment partnerships, they're really poorly resourced, and they are a great way for people to come together. So we definitely need more funding, and I think we do need more direct funding going into the environment. So, for example, when water companies do rivers, they get prosecuted, big fines, but that money just disappears, goes into the treasury, it doesn't go back into our rivers. So I'd like to see more funding directly invested into our environment. I'm hopeful that the environmental land management schemes will kind of start a new era of how we manage our land. I think at the minute there's a lot of land that's being wasted. It's not profitable because it's always wet. But I'm hoping that with the new land schemes, farmers and landowners will receive compensation for that land, and that actually might become, the most diverse that pass along someone's estate or something like that. So I think it's really important that we look at land differently. And then I put collaborative landscape scale conservation as well. I think you've probably all heard about nature recovery networks and landscape scale nature recovery strategies. I think those will link really nicely with all the other schemes that are going on, and if we can all join up the projects that we're doing, then hopefully we'll see some nice changes. And then finally, my colleagues and I, we have this channel where we share pictures from walkovers, some nights and some are less nice. But I'd like to see fewer pictures like this on our channel. So sewage fungus, see too much of that, just general, I don't really want to know what that is. And then this picture at the end here was sort of frozen slurry that was directly discharging into a river, which we've affectionately named a poosicle. So I'd like to see fewer of those. I'd like to see less concrete channels and just concrete in general, this over-engineering and squeezing of rivers, fewer weirs, and those sandbags at the end that just makes something out of World War II. So yeah, I'd like to see less grey environments and more greener environments. I'd like to see floodplains and rivers connected. I'd like to see multi-channel rivers. I'd like to see habitats like wet woodland becoming more normal. We need more logs and rivers, and I'd like to see conservation incorporated into education more, for not just primary school age, but also secondary school as well. And finally, I'd like to see more of these. I'm going to get it to play. Oh. Yeah, I'd like to see more of these. Yeah, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mel.